Today, Eoghan Corry is with us as well, the travel and aviation journalist. Eoghan, I know you, like Andrew, were listening to what Dalton Phillips had to say. What more can you tell us about these holding pens, as some have described them?
Good afternoon, Kieran. It does sound a little bit like the Maynooth cattle mart in the old days where the sheep were put. I do think, standing back, there was very little that Dalton Phillips could have done to meet the expectations of the grand plan, given that the staffing situation is so stretched. And almost all the emphasis seems to have been on passenger behaviour. We're going to have 40 extra staff. I think Andrew just alluded to that, moved from Cork. They really, what caught them on Sunday was they had no excess staff for the absences. And to give the sort of guarantee that Kieran O'Donnell was looking for, Dalton Phillips needs not just his team, but his bench well ready to throw substitutes in should people get called off sick. And it's clearly he can't deliver that. What the emphasis instead has been to more or less scare passengers into not coming too early. Having scared passengers into coming 2.5 hours for the short haul and then 3.5 for the long haul, it's very interesting they stuck to that time. That time guideline is still there, but they're now sending out the message, we don't want you too early. And what has been widely described as holding pens has had a hugely negative reaction across social media. I suspect that's really the thinking behind that is to get passengers to rethink what time they're coming to the airport and not arrive too early, because that's what it's subsequent to Sunday. That's what was causing the queues we saw Monday and Tuesday. Staffing was up to the level that had been before the weekend and had been working. It's just that people were arriving early because the trust they had in the DA was breached by the fact so many people missed their flights last Sunday.
Yeah, and listen, the human nature being what it is, people will still, you'd imagine, turn up early, and they might say, listen, I prefer spend a little bit of time in a holding pen if I have to, rather than the possibility of missing my flight. Again, they don't necessarily trust the DAA to get them through security on time. So just for people at home to reiterate, it's 2.5 hours for short haul, 3.5 hours for long haul, but add an hour if you're checking baggage. Is that it?
Oh, we are in such a mess here. Is it 2.5 hours and 3.5 hours, or is it another hour for baggage? It had to be a clear message. We had a little bit of deviation from that message in recent weeks, and even in the Oireachtas committee today, it's not clear. Does that include your baggage, your check-in baggage time? I suspect Dalton Phillips is concentrating completely on what he talks about with security queues, because he doesn't have control over airline check-in desks. And we've had a few situations with airlines, the same sort of absences impacting on baggage check-in. When an airline has a problem with baggage check-in, though, they delay the flight. Even if it's a connecting flight. It happened with Lufthansa, not last Sunday, the Sunday before, where everybody missed their connections in Frankfurt because there was too much of a problem putting the bags on board. I suspect that, at some stage they have to decide what the message is. That's what we really need them to do. It's 2.5 hours for short haul, 3.5 for long haul. Yes, we've decided on that, but are we adding an extra hour for baggage? There seems to be ambiguity on that today, and that then creates the problem. If you're telling people not to come too early to the airport and you haven't made a clear message as to how far in advance you want them to be there. By the way, 2.5 hours is plenty. Before COVID, an hour would do you. I mean, it's 3.5 for long haul is, especially for North America, is pretty important, because you will face up to 40 minutes of an extra security queue, up to about 20-25 minutes for an extra security queue going to America, and up to 40-45 minutes for US immigration. So 3.5 hours is probably, you're going to need all of that. The holding pens, or the whatever we would like to call them, we've no real guidance, except they've talked about putting facilities in with toilets and cover, and there's covered car parks. Most of these problems are Terminal 1. There's a covered car park. The car parks in Dublin Airport are covered, and they're directly opposite the terminal. So they're the sort of things they're talking about trialling this Sunday. But I do feel the real message is don't come early. When you're talking about facilities and putting people on the side, anybody looking at it will say, why should I be standing in Dublin Airport in a holding area rather than arriving and then going straight into the security queue? I think that's the message they want to convey. But as you said, a holiday is a big thing to lose. If you've got a family of children waiting for this, and it's 3 years since you've been away, people are not going to put that at risk.
Here's a question for you, and maybe it's a difficult one to answer.
If you've
got fast track booked, do you still have to arrive 2.5 hours before a London to Dublin flight, or a flight to London from Dublin, should I say?
I think you will get through in fast track quicker than the 2.5 hours. There's absolutely no doubt of that. Even when fast track ran to its peak, it was 35 minutes, which is about half what the security queues were doing. The 2.5 hours is a pretty important one from DAA's point of view, because it gives them that legal option of saying, if you arrived only 2 hours, we're not liable for you missing your flight. So when we get into a claim situation, so passengers with fast track can certainly arrive less than 2.5 hours and will make the flight.
This is, I'm just going to read out one text along these lines, but it's indicative of plenty of texts, similar texts. Hi, we're flying from Dublin on Monday. We've got 4 teenagers, one of whom is autistic. What do we need to do so that she doesn't have to stand around in chaos?
There are people in the terminal, yellow jumpered people who are in charge of monitoring the queues, getting people out of a queue who are about to miss their flight. That should be your first stop. If not, the airport information. Anyone with autism is not going to be expected to be held in a holding area and go through any of the trauma that the rest of us are going to be subjected to.
Okay, so make yourself known to that listener.
Absolutely,
and to all of the listeners maybe getting in touch. You've got children with additional needs. It will obviously, says another listener, stay busy this weekend. But is there a way to ascertain when the difficult or extra busy times are? For example, our flight is on Friday week at 11 p.m, so 11 at night. Is there the same volume at night as there is in the morning and during the day?
Absolutely not. Rush hour is 6 to 8 in the morning. It's when most of the flights go through. There's 2 or 3. Most airports in Europe have a number of peaks depending on how busy the airport is. Dublin Airport really only has one and a couple of half peaks then later in the day. So the really busy period is 6 to about 8, and then you can see, if you follow the Dublin Airport app in normal times, you can see the queue tapering off down to 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 10 minutes. That time of the evening it wouldn't be a lot. Now Friday there is a sort of a mini peak coming into the evening, but not that late. But the real problem, and it always comes back to what Dalton Phillips was trying to manage with his messaging out of the Oireachtas committee today, is that they mean nothing if people who have an afternoon flight are arriving early in the morning ahead of someone in the queue, or ahead of someone who has a 9 a.m. flight in the queue. And that's what we've been seeing as a result of what happened last Sunday.
Yeah, and again, it's human nature, and we can kind of tell people not to do it, but they will. I was recently travelling to an airport, and someone who was on the same flight as me turned up 5 hours in advance because there was so many warnings about how long it was going to take to get through the airport. So you're right, like they would have ended up in the queue ahead of people whose flights were leaving an awful lot earlier than them. Just one more question, Owen, before I let you go. Will the DAA have the onward connections lane in Terminal 1 open? Because I'm arriving at Terminal 1, and if I have to come out and wait in the holding pen to go back in, because the DAA have kept the lane closed, it is not fair. It's not my fault my flight arrives too early and there's more than a 2.5 hour gap between my connections.
Now we have the other issue, and it doesn't just apply to the onward connections, it applies to airline check-in desks in general. Terminal 1 has some of the long-haul flights. The Qatar flight is there, the Etihad flight is there, and a lot of baggage going on to those Lufthansa, Air France, Air Turkish Airlines. So when the connection lanes should be open airside, when we've had people arriving when parts of the airport aren't open. Even the fast track hasn't been open for the very early arrivals. So when if people are arriving too early, it means that bits of the airport that they need aren't open and aren't working. And that's what a lot of the hanging around landside we've seen in the last couple of weeks, but especially since Sunday, has been going on. Now, the airside connections is an interesting one because not all of them have been open in recent weeks, but I would imagine that if you were working out, trying to prevent what happened last weekend happening, keeping all the airside connections open, and this raises the lovely option of people from Kerry saying, why would I drive to or people in Munster, why would I drive to Dublin when I can fly from Farranfore and stay airside, car park onto the aircraft in 15 minutes. Donegal has the same option. Sadly, Shannon, Cork and Knock don't have flights to Dublin, but if you want to fly to Dublin and stay airside, there is another way of avoiding those queues.
There's another way of doing it. Yeah, well, listen, I hope they do. For that listener, have those onward connection lanes open. Could you imagine having a stopover in Dublin, and for that stopover, you were moved through the airport and told you had to wait in a pen beside a Portaloo in a car park for an hour because you had so much time between your flights. Anyway, Eoghan Corry